This is a lesson on linear functions. Before we learn about linear functions, we must first be sure we know what an actual function is. A function is the relationship between the inputs of an equation and its outputs. For a relationship to be considered a function, it must never have more than one output for each input. The inputs and outputs are usually represented with the variables y and x. X represents the inputs and y represents the outputs. A linear function is the most basic function, which creates a straight line when it's graphed. It's represented by the equation y equals mx plus b, and the most basic form of the graph will look like this. Linear functions are seen everywhere. For example, the shape of pyramids contain linear functions. Also, standing in age order and realizing that the height steadily increases is a great example of a linear function. Plus, easy ones to spot like the path of going up on a roller coaster. Also, linear functions less easy to spot like a car traveling at a steady speed on a road are all linear functions. Going back to the equation of a linear function, or y equals mx plus b, the variables m and b represent different characteristics of the function and different ways the function can be altered. M is the variable for slope. Slope is the amount of slant a line has. It's calculated by rise over run, or how many units above one point on the line is from another, divided by how many units to the side the points are apart. For example, in this graph, the slope would be 3 because the point 1, 3 is 3 units above 0, 0, and 1 point to the right, making rise over run 3 over 1, and 3 divided by 1 is 3, so the slope will be 3. So m affects how steep the line is. If m is between 1 and negative 1, the line will be tilted closer to the x-axis. And if m is larger than 1 or smaller than negative 1, the line will be tilted closer to the x-axis. So the larger the absolute value of m is, the more vertical the line will be, and the smaller the absolute value of m is, the more horizontal the line will be. M also affects which direction the line will be pointed in. If m is negative, the line will be slanted to where it is running from high to low. If m is positive, the line will be slanted to where it's running from low to high. The b variable affects where on the graph your line will be located. B represents the y-intercept, which is the place where the line hits the y-axis. This means that the larger b is, the higher your line will be on your graph. You can learn more about a function by looking at the 4 faces of a function, or growth. Growth stands for graph, rule, words, and table. Rule is the equation of your quadratic function, and words is the problem. Let's begin with words. An example of words for a linear function is a boy starts saving up his allowance so he can go to Disneyland with his friends. The tickets are $87. He already has $23 saved and he earns $8 a week for his allowance. How long will it be until he has enough money to buy a ticket? So from this problem, you can pick out the important information. You are looking for how long it will take him until he has enough money to buy a ticket. So the important information would be that the tickets are $87, he already has $23, and he earns $8 a week. As we move on to rule, you can plug in all the information that you've gathered from the problem, which includes that he earns $8 a week, and that he already starts out with $23. Since 23 is the starting point, you would replace b with 23, meaning that 23 is the y-intercept. And you will replace 8 with m, and 8 over 1 will be your slope. With this equation, you can figure out the answer to your problem by replacing y with 87, because 87 is the answer you're trying to achieve, and x represents the amount of weeks. This will bring you to the equation 87 equals 8x plus 23. Next, you will subtract 23 from both sides of the equation and attempt to get x alone, which will bring you to 64 equals 8x. You are still trying to get x alone, so you must divide both sides by 8, giving you 8 equals x. This means that the amount of weeks it will take for the boy to earn enough money is 8 weeks. The next step in identifying the 4 faces of a function for this problem is tables. You must create an xy table with x representing the inputs and y representing the outputs. Since you know that the answer is 8 weeks, the inputs must be from 0 to 8. Next, you must enter each input into the x of the equation to find y and place the answer on the y side of the table with its corresponding input. After you plug 8 into the equation, the output you will get is 87. This confirms that your answer was correct. All of these inputs and outputs of the equation will be points on your graph. If you graphed 0, 23, 1, 31, and 2, 39, and so on, and connected them, you would find the graph of your linear function. As we move on to our graphs portion, and you did not graph using a table, you can graph by simply using the equation. Since b is the y-intercept, you can take b, or 23 in this case, and place that point on the y-axis. Next, because you know the slope is rise over run, you can count 8 units up, then 1 unit to the right from 0, 23, because the slope is 8. Then you should place a point. This point should be at 1, 31. Keep doing this from each point until you reach the final point of 8, 87. Next, you should connect these points and you will end up with your final graph, which should look like this. As the points go up on the y-axis, it represents the boy's money increasing, and as the graph slowly grows wider, this represents the amount of weeks. This concludes the lesson on linear functions.